Welcome to Seekers and Shifters, where we talk to the world's foremost experts in personal growth and development and ask them everything we really want to know. Hey there, my Seekers and Shifters friends. I just did the coolest episode with my friend Sean Sessel. We've been friends for a really long time, like 7-8 years, and we've seen all the ups and downs of the coaching industry. He's a super smart guy. He has this model called the 7 layers of reality that he was talking about online. I said, oh, you got to come on the show. You got to explain that to us. So he did. So he came on and we just recorded that. I think you guys are really going to enjoy this. We get into all kinds of cool shit, talking about the different layers of reality, talking about shadow work, talking about where the coaching industry is going. So if you're interested in any of that, join us for today's episode and check out Sean Sessel. Sean Sessel, thank you for being with us. And do you want to introduce yourself to the team?
Sure. Yeah. My name is Sean Sessel. I am the founder of the Oculus Institute. I mostly help people get clear on a career that is both personally fulfilling and also financially rewarding. And then all the mechanics and planning, that could be a couple of years down the line. So there's normally some planning and some steps and helping with whether that be the employment or the entrepreneurship to make that happen. That's kind of my main focus. But I'm also a trainer of NLP, and I have a whole toolbox of various psycho-spiritual tools to address all those sorts of problems, which is how I ended up here, because I shared one with Michelle that she liked.
Right. I saw it on the internet and I was like, you have to come on the show. We have to talk about it. Sean and I, we've been friends for years, 7 or 8 years, maybe. We are, which makes us coaching OGs now. If you guys are in the world of online coaching or adjacent to it, there's a lot of people who just kind of got into it in the last couple of years and were like, oh yeah, I'm an online coach. And I'm like, you haven't seen what me and Sean have seen. We've seen some ups, we've seen some downs. It was really interesting because when we got into it, when you and I met, we were in a mastermind together, 2017, 2018, something like that.
Yeah, I joined in 2017.
Yeah. And back then it was kind of a weird thing to be doing. And then I think it was with COVID, maybe like 2020 is when a lot of people just started jumping in because everybody was like, oh my God, everybody's online. We can make whatever we know into a course and we can have, I don't know if you remember, but back in those golden halcyon days of 17, 18, I would explain to somebody that what I did was in a course format. They'd be like, oh my God, that's so interesting. And I'd say, oh, we have Zoom meetings. And they'd be like, what's Zoom? And I'd be like, we can talk to each other on the computer, like the Jetsons. They're like, it's really cool. It was this whole new frontier. And now you say, oh yeah, we have Zoom meetings. And people are like, oh my God, I don't want to get on it.
Yeah. 2019 was the best year for my coaching business. That was the peak year. I mean, it's something that I intend to stick with and find a way to make work no matter the environment, because it's what I really love. Which gets back to, what I do, right? I live what I preach, on that. And I think that's what ultimately makes a career worthwhile, is when you're willing to do the hard stuff and find a way even when it's challenging.
Yeah. And I mean, I would say that about entrepreneurship in general. Like when somebody calls me and asks, and they're still at this stage of like, do I even want to be an entrepreneur? Or maybe, maybe I've only been ever working for other people. Like, do I want to start my own business? What I'm listening for is, do they have a passion for it, either for business or for the thing that they do in business? Because that's what's going to carry you through. You do this long enough, you're going to have some up years and you're going to have some down years and you're going to have some really scary times. And so if somebody's in it for anything but the love of the game, you know what I mean? Like the love of what they do, I sometimes will try to talk them out of it. I had a guy call me one time and basically say he wanted to be an entrepreneur to fund his rock star career. Like he really wanted to be a musician, but he thought maybe if he went in business for a few years, he could make some money and fund that. And I was like, just do the music thing, dude. Like just go straight to that. Like,
yeah, no, if your goal is to fund something else, entrepreneurship is rarely the bridge to do that.
Right. A lot of flexibility and a lot of freedom, like cool. And you're okay with I think I was actually talking to my team about this morning. Like there's a flexibility security trade-off. And some people are more into security and they're cool to like sacrifice flexibility, and they'll go get a job and the job can say, you need to be in the office for these hours and here's when you can go on vacation. And it's like, for me, I'd rather sacrifice financial security and I can go on vacation whenever the fuck I want. I don't know about you. I think it's personality driven, I'm sure.
I think there are ways that you can win on both of those, but it requires you to have two skill sets. And the more you have these two skill sets, and they multiply, they don't add, they multiply. So if one of them is lacking, you're screwed. The two skill sets is being able to add value for a specific group of people. And the second is being able to persuade those people that you can add value so that they will pay you for it. And whether that be in an employment context or an entrepreneurship context, right, that's where you get a trade-off. So like my father, for example, had a lot of flexibility and a lot of security when he was working as a salesman because he was really good. He can Jedi mind trick people, right? He did it to Michael Dell. Well, he didn't Jedi mind trick Michael Dell, but he built a relationship and he ended up selling a lot of stuff to Dell. When somebody has that skill set, they can get away with a lot. He managed to get away with not having to deal with a lot of bureaucracy because he's very good at his job. And the same thing with entrepreneurs, right? If you have an entrepreneur who, knows how to market really well and is delivering a lot of value, then that gives them more freedom, more income to do all of these other things.
100%. I mean, no, it's true. Like if you're a sales guy and you're bringing in the cash, no one's going to give a shit when you go on vacation as long as you keep bringing in those numbers. Was your dad an NLP guy? Is that how you got into it?
No. All of his was instinctive. So he was the first salesman for a little company called NVIDIA back in 1995.
Oh, wow.
Obviously that worked out very well for him, but he never studied anything formally. He just instinctively does a lot of that, like pattern interrupts. There was a time he did a pattern interrupt in a critical sales meeting and in the most bizarre way, but he knew that he had to pattern interrupt and it was all instinctive. But he has this almost supernatural ability to persuade people of things. Like, for example, like when I was a kid, I wanted a snake for years. And then I sat down and had a conversation with him. I got up thinking I no longer wanted a snake. And it took me a year to figure out what had happened.
Like a year later, you're like, wait a fucking second. I did want that snake.
And I got the snake eventually.
Good. Yeah, you outlasted him. I bet you did. For folks listening who aren't NLP trainers, like we are, a pattern interrupt is basically when something's going one way, a train of thought's going one way, and you do something to interrupt that and push it a different way, which is something you could do in conversations with other people, something you could do with yourself. I actually pattern interrupt myself on purpose quite a bit. One of the ways that I do that is by travel. I like to travel, right? And so if I'm getting really stuck in a rut and I'm able to go somewhere different, sometimes I find just a change of scenery will help get the old wheels turning, get the inspiration. So, that's sometimes we pattern interrupt ourselves. I'm explaining this to the audience, Sean, if you're wondering, because I was given feedback recently by my podcast producer that said, you talk to a lot of NLP people about a lot of NLP stuff, and somebody who's not in NLP or hasn't been trained in it has no idea what you're talking about. So you need to stop and giving asides. So I'm trying to do that for you people. If you hear me giving asides, that's why I'm doing it. Sean, I wanted to talk to you because I love to talk to you about whatever, but you put up on the internet the other day a 7-layer model of reality, and I was fascinated. And you so graciously agreed to come on the show and explain it to us, and you brought it with you, right?
Yeah, sure. You want me to share it?
I want you to share it, and conscious of the fact that there are some people watching this on YouTube and they'll be able to see it. There are also some people listening to this in podcast form, so you might have to talk through it a little bit for those who cannot see the visual.
Okay, so I'll give a brief description for the people who are listening on audio. So I want you to imagine you have an upside down triangle, right? And then divide it into 7 different layers. So at the top, you'll have a thin layer and then another thin layer and another thin layer all the way down. And so we're going to talk about the bottom first, and we're going to move up, and then we're going to kind of go into more detail. And then I'm going to tell you about some other things you're going to put on the side. So if you have your little paper, upside down triangle, at the bottom, you should have a triangle pointing down. And in my little slide here, that's red. It's labeled physical. So this refers to physical reality, which everybody knows, everybody plays a part in. And for many people, this is what they think is all that exists. I don't believe that. And this model is a description of what else I think is there, divided into 6 other layers or perspectives. So that's the physical world. So now, if you look at the slice above the bottom triangle, that one's colored orange, and it's labeled etheric. So the etheric is going to refer to the types of energies mostly that you talk about in traditional Chinese medicine. So qi, meridians, all that kind of stuff. Also, astral projection would be the psycho-etheric body. So The bioetheric would be the TCM stuff. And that's in that etheric category. Now, etheric is going to be intertwined with your vital force, like your life force. The difference between a live body and a dead body that's just died, the etheric's totally gone in the dead body. And you can tell something's different there. It's going to be intertwined with desire in general, but especially food and sex and libido are all tied in there. So masculine, feminine polarity energy is there in a significant way. Now, if we go to the slice above that, so we have the bottom triangle, we have a slice above that. We're now on the third slice. That's the emotional layer. So this is going to include the chakras. The structures are actually there on the emotional layer. This is also going to be where there's chords. So when people talk about chords, that's also going to be on this layer. We move up above that. The next slice is labeled cognitive. It's blue. So there's a couple different sub-layers in all of these, by the way, which I'm not going to go into unless you specifically get asked. But cognitive, there are different types of cognitive energy that, there's almost like different textures or different, like if you think about water flowing, like different ways that it can flow. And these actually map for anybody who's done certain schools of NLP or spiral dynamics or integral theory. These actually map to the VLs, or what I call the CLs, because I've developed a further theory on this.
I noticed that they're colored by values. They're also colored by chakra colors. Did you? They correspond to the chakra colors and to the values levels in NLP.
You mean the layers?
Yeah.
So the layers are not specifically tied to chakra colors. I just kind of went with let's just say my associations of the colors for those layers. If you look at coloring for values levels or for, an integral theory from Ken Wilber or spiral dynamics, Ken Wilber and spiral dynamics actually use different colors. So there are different ways that people will color those. One thing that I will note is that when we talk about these different types of energies that exist within each layer, like, for example, the chakras in the emotional layer or the CLs, complexity levels in the cognitive layer, each one of those is actually resonant with another layer. So within each layer, there's a microcosm that is then resonant, right? Which is really cool in my mind. That's just mind-blowing and awesome. Okay, so now if we go up to the fifth slice, it's labeled astral, right? So people might say that this is where you have the seemingly separate soul. From this perspective, the soul believes itself to be a separate entity that's its own thing. It's more like a whirlpool in an ocean, but for now we're just going to treat it as its own thing. So that one's colored purple, right? So this is where you're going to have the awareness or witness state, which is different than the thoughts and emotions in the mind, right? This is where you're going to have the essence, which is constant, whereas the thoughts and emotions of the mind are changing all the time. When I help people get clear on a career that will be fulfilling until they retire or where they don't even want to retire, you cannot do that at the level of mind, right? So the physical and etheric are the body. The emotional and cognitive are the mind. You have to go above that to the level of the soul and to the essence of the soul to get something that's constant. That's why I have a 100% success rate for the people who actually complete their part of the work, because this is a reliable, repeatable process that's based on how the human system functions. Most people are always stuck in their mind, and that's why most people never really know what they want, right? So
the mind is divided and it's fighting itself.
Correct, exactly. The mind is divided into parts or even splinters. So parts is technically an NLP term, but there's also what I call splinters of consciousness, which are like even smaller than parts. And people don't realize that they have this legion of schizophrenic fragments in their mind that it's all these different things all the time. Whereas the soul is cohesive, right? So at the astral layer, it's not divided.
That's so cool. And I love the way of explaining it. And I love that, the movie Inside Out came out and Inside Out 2 came out because people are like, oh, like Inside Out. I'm like, yeah, exactly. Kind of. I mean, they're not exactly representative of different emotions, but the way there's like a bunch of different people in your head fighting over what to do. Yeah, that's a real thing.
Right. And so if you can get to the point where you're operating primarily from that astral level, then what you can do is you can take the chaos of the mind and you can start to reprogram it and to order it in a way. It's basically like debugging a computer program. If your code's really buggy and it's producing dysfunctional results, then you want to go clean it up, find out where the incompatibilities are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we now move up to the 6th slice, which is the second one from the top. So this is the cosmic layer. And so this is less so a layer than it is a shift in perspective. Because now what's happening is we move out from the idea of being the whirlpool and realize we're actually just part of the ocean. So in many ancient traditions, right, it's known or it's taught in esoteric traditions and wisdom traditions that we are not separate from the universe, right? And at a very, very, very deep level, my experience is that is true. And so the cosmic perspective is when these boundaries of self, start to dissolve, and there begins to be this sense of identity that goes beyond the seemingly separate self. So that can eventually extend to a state that I call cosmic unity, where one is having the locus of selfhood identified with all of, multiversal, omniversal reality, whatever you want to call it. But it's so big and so extensive. And if you've had this experience, whether that be in meditation or in psychedelics or whatever, it's just vastly more than the human mind can even come close to describe it.
I was about to crack a joke and be like, and if you want to jump straight to the cosmic layer, take a mushroom.
Well, I mean, I would say that depends, right? So some people, the mind can really fight and hold on and will not let you do that. And for some people, it's not even, recommended for various, psychiatric reasons. If there's dissociative identity, obviously there are legal implications, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But
no, don't take a mushroom just because Michelle said so.
Yeah, exactly. Never take a mushroom just because somebody tells you to.
So I just have like a camera and a microphone, like.
So, sure. And so you can look at the cosmic layer or the cosmic perspective as eventually extending to all that is manifest. Okay. So then if that's the case, what the hell is that top layer? If we just talked about everything, then what's on top? So the top is the nirvanic, and I have it colored a deep, 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 dark purple, almost black. And I chose that color very intentionally because that's the color that I've experienced in this state. But the nirvanic is the unmanifest. So that which does not exist. It's the pure potential of consciousness from which all that is manifest arises.
So what some might call God?
Well, so God can be used to refer to the cosmic unity totality. It can also be used to refer to the nirvanic pure potential of consciousness from which it emerges. And then in a state of non-dual consciousness, and people misuse that word a lot, but in a state of truly non-dual consciousness, you actually recognize that the two of them are the same thing, which it's again, logically, it doesn't make any sense. I know it is only in that state that it makes sense. You're not in that state, it doesn't make sense. But from that perspective, you're actually identified with all of the layers simultaneously, in a way that I find to be very pleasant. I normally, the few times I've been in that state, and it's only been a handful of times, it's a lot of laughing. Everything is just really, really, really a lot of gratitude. Everything's really funny. Everything's really joyous. And it's giant cosmic joke.
Can I ask how you got to that state when you got to that state?
It was assisted with psychedelics. It's not something that I am yet capable of doing sober. I do know somebody who is. He's been meditating for 60 years and he's partnered with the Dalai Lama on things. And, he's probably the closest to enlightened of anyone that I've ever met. But very, very few people are going to enter. And even with psychedelics, it's hard to enter that state. But it is generally going to require a lot of prior sober work on moving through these layers and clearing up the gunk, as it were, and bringing things into order and coherence to even get to a point where adding psychedelics can even get you to that state. And then it's generally going to require a high dose another warning here, then this is kind of important. If you're looking at this triangle, right, you'll see it's this upside down triangle. If you try to run a lot of energy through the more celestial layers, right, which, are the ones that are higher up on your sheet, and you haven't fortified and stabilized the more terrestrial layers, which are further below, then you will create instability. Right. So, there are cases of people who try to force things with psychedelics and it causes a break, right? Like a mental break. So sometimes the best thing that you can do is actually the preparation of making sure that you're healthy, making sure that you're not filling your body with junk, making sure that you are congruent with your desires rather than dealing with some kind of shame, making sure that, your libido and all of that is in a healthy configuration, making sure that you are unstressed and you've cleaned up you've cleared your emotional debt, as somebody I used to know used to say, that on the cognitive layer, you don't have incoherent, contradictory beliefs that are creating chaos, right? Doing all of that then prepares you for the more celestial layers without creating the risk of a breakdown, because these things, it's the same with the chakras and it's the same with the complexity levels. If you have a wound or a blockage in something that you've passed through, it makes it harder to enter into, sustain, or stabilize the higher complexity, higher energy states.
100%. I'm so glad you brought that up. I mean, look, there's a reason for folks listening. If you know people that are really into the woo, there's a reason that tends to go along with super clean eating, working out every day, meditating every day, getting your sleep. I've become so boring, Sean. I mean, I go to bed at 9 and I wake up at 5. I do no drugs, no alcohol. And I walk every day, go on my stupid little mental health walk. And I eat chicken and vegetables. You know what? If you don't do that, you're not going to be able to handle some of this stuff that comes up higher. Like you're saying, it causes breaks. And it's like people do try to take shortcuts. I know if you're going on some kind of a retreat, so if anybody's like signed up for one of those Costa Rican deals or you're about to go do some ayahuasca, some bufo or whatever, they're going to tell you for about a month before, here's what you need to be eating. Here's what you need to be not eating. Here's what you need to be not drinking, not doing. Like come down here in the right state, or else, you can get very physically ill and also have psychotic episodes happen like Sean's mentioning.
Yeah, absolutely. And that addresses the physical and the etheric, because that's another thing is with food, right? There's a lot of etheric energy in the various foods and the various not foods that people eat, because there are a lot of things people eat that are not food.
Yeah.
So,
more and more every day. It's kind of hard. So it's getting harder and harder to avoid the not foods.
But I would say that perhaps some of the best things that you can do to stabilize the system, and we will talk about the arrows on the sides here now, but some of the best things you can do is clean up the emotional debt, clean up the inner conflict, clear out the resentment, clear out the fear, clear out contradictory beliefs, clear out limiting beliefs, start to spend more time in that state of witness awareness. Those things there are also critical. So now I told you I was going to add some things after we had the triangle. You'll notice on the right side of my screen, it has an arrow going down that says manifestation. And then on the left side, it has an arrow going up that's labeled information. So what happens is manifestation flows down through the layers and information flows back up through the layers. And the difference between that is that when manifestation is going down, it will proceed all the way down. It will not stop at any point. Whereas information, when it goes up, can enter into a layer that can then process it and either send it up, send it back down, or clear it, right? So when information is coming up, there's the ability to modulate it. So I'll give you an example of manifestation flowing down. Let's say you have somebody who is, to use the parlance of one of my teachers on the subject, asleep at the level of the astral, right? So they are not in a state of awareness. They are entirely identified with the mind. So because the astral is not doing any kind of cleanup work, they now have a lot of contradictory beliefs and a lot of cognitive dissonance. And that's going to produce emotional stress, right? Because I mean, again, NLP, we know that if you have a bunch of chaotic beliefs in there, that's gonna end up creating drama. Then that's gonna flow down and create disruptions at the etheric level. This is where in traditional Chinese medicine, they're gonna talk about stuck qi and all this kind of stuff. And they'll tell you that the emotions are related to what happens in the qi. This is all diagrammed out here. It can result in disruptions to libido, for example, either sending it into overdrive or sending it into not being present. And then that stuck qi and all those other things will then flow down into some form of physical illness. Right? So this is manifestation flowing down. The opposite would be somebody is awake on the level of the astral. And so they go and they do their work and they pay attention to the thoughts that are going on in their mind, and they uproot the beliefs that are holding them back, and they create a coherent, efficient cognitive layer. Right? So you'll notice some people, even if they have high intellect, may not be able to actually process and complete things because of the fragmentation. Whereas you have other people who they've got things coherent and boom, they can just go, right? And then what that's going to do is that's going to produce a lot less emotional stress because, they know what they want. They have the intention set from the astral. They have beliefs that support that intention. They have reasonable expectations of reality. All of these things is going to produce generally less emotional volatility. And that's going to allow the qi to move in a healthy way, which is going to result in a very robust physical system. And the kinds of things that can be healed by a body that is fully energized and fully empowered by this all being locked in sync is a lot more than most people realize. I mean, I for example, I should not be able to walk. A couple years ago, I was walking home from the gym and some woman took an illegal left turn at full speed in a van and she hit me. So my left leg buckled, my face shattered her windshield, and I woke up 41 feet away. The doctors told me I wouldn't walk right again, even with surgery. 6 months later, full recovery, doing CrossFit with no pain, no surgery. To this day, I can squat almost 300 pounds. Right. And the doctors are like, I have no idea how that happened.
You're like, I do.
I use tools from every single one of these layers. Right. I treated the whole system. So did I do all the stuff that the doctors told me to do? Yes. Did I do my physical therapy? Absolutely. Did I take my supplements? Yes. Did I eat healthy? Yes. Did I sleep a lot? I was sleeping 12 hours a day in the beginning. Did I drink a lot of water? Yes. Did I do some self-Reiki, which is on the etheric layer? Yes. Did I keep my emotional stress low? Yes. Did I make sure that my beliefs were consistent with the possibility of healing? Yes. Did I make sure that I understood the anatomy of the knee so my unconscious mind could work on it? Yes. Did I do other stuff, the astral layer? Yes. Right. So it's a sum total approach. You want to not exclude anything.
Super, super cool. And what I love about it is the order that it goes in, because so many people try to skip bottom layers. In my work, my self-work in the last few years, I really realized how much I skipped, especially that physical layer, just associated from my physical needs. I took a lot of drugs. And when I say I took a lot of drugs, guys, I don't mean I was on all kinds of illegal drugs. I was on like legal drugs, right? But I took a lot of legal drugs, ADHD stimulants, lots of caffeine, trying to stay awake. If I needed to go down, I would take some alcohol, maybe some Xanax, you know what I mean? All stuff prescribed, all stuff that was completely legal, all stuff that is completely like socially accepted, using food even to come up or to come down. And I didn't realize until I really started doing all this that, oh my God, I really have skipped this layer of what my body needs first. And because I skipped the layer of what my body needs, because I can't be bothered with that. I got shit to do. I'm busy. I want to jump up to my mind. I want to get up to the cool places. Right. But because I had skipped that, I wasn't getting that information that you're talking about, where the information comes up from the body first. Right. When you dissociate from the needs of your body by not sleeping enough, not eating right, not paying attention to what you need, you're also not getting the information that is held within your body. Right. The Body Keeps the Score is the famous book about this, how trauma is stored in the body. There's lots and lots of other research on this that you guys can go and find. But when you starting to pay attention to what your body is actually trying to tell you, it's not the most comfortable process, Sean.
In my experience, is more comfortable than the alternative in the long run.
Well, that's fair. I mean, that's true. I think we could say on a really high level, right? If you're ever trying to avoid discomfort, you're going to end up bringing a lot more of it onto you, right? It's always better to kind of face the discomfort head on. But when you start digging through the physical, right, and you start associating back into your body and you stop doing the things that numb you out and get you away from that awareness, you're going to be aware of, oh man, first of all, I'm a lot more tired than I thought. I need a lot more rest than I thought. Oh man, foods really affect me a lot more than I realized. Oh, if I haven't eaten sugar in a while and I eat some sugar, man, that's like being on a drug. And you can tell just right. If I haven't had caffeine in a while and I take some caffeine, or if I've only had caffeine for a long time and I go off of caffeine, you start to be able to really tune into like, there's a lot more going on than you realize, right? It might take a year or two of work just on the physical.
Sure. And that's not the only place where things can get cut, right? So for example, people can also cut off their emotions. They suppress their emotions, they deny their emotions, they push it down. But if you constrict that part of the pipe, then what's going to happen is now you're going to be disconnected from not just your emotions, but also from your etheric and from your physical, right? And so depending on where you put the constriction, you're going to create those issues. Another one is within the cognitive, you can divide it into sublayers. The more celestial of which is the conscious mind. But if you look at the subconscious and unconscious minds, which are my terminology slightly different from what they teach in NLP, and based on how the information is stored, most people do not have access to where they can examine their unconscious mind at will, right? Especially because when it comes to certain thoughts that they may be ashamed of or something like that, it's painful to acknowledge some of those thoughts and beliefs or those emotions. And so they turn that blind eye, and then that clutches that pipe shut, and that creates a problem because now you're not getting all the information. And if you're not getting the information, you cannot do anything about it. So Dr. Rondell, who was my very first esoteric teacher, Dr. Wood was my very first esoteric teacher, and he passed on the recordings of Dr. Rondell. Dr. Rondell used to say that if you discover you have termites in your house, you should be happy because now you can do something about the termites. Right? If you don't know the termites are there, the house just falls down.
No, absolutely. I mean, look, it's when you're saying, okay, if you really want to get up here, you really want to be aligned, you really want to get to your soul mission, your soul purpose in life and be fully alive, you've got to go through all these layers. And what's hard for people is the patience to do that. First, like the awareness that they need to do that. And then the patience to do that, because, we live in a society where we love some instant gratification. Like, I want to be enlightened now. What can I do? And I think that's where a lot of the, I joked about, well, if you want to jump up here, take a mushroom. But I think that's where that thinking comes from is, hey, what can I do right now without having to do all the rest of this work to get up here? And you see a lot of people that jump up and then or try to jump up. It doesn't work. And so then they go back and they do it kind of in the right order. Right. I don't know. What do you think about people trying to jump too fast into the wrong spot? You see it a lot?
I have seen it for sure. I think as much as I believe psychedelics can be a very helpful tool, I do think that they do appeal to people who are trying to take that kind of shortcut, and they are often used very irresponsibly. Keep in mind that in the old tribal days, these were sacred medicine. This was not something that you just did whenever you felt like it.
Wasn't like a Friday night.
Right. It was something where like there was a ritual and there's a shaman and there was a thing, right? And so if you look at me, I mean, I spent more than 10 years doing esoteric work before I ever touched psychedelic. And I think people want to avoid or skip that kind of more drudgery part of really doing the shadow work. And it's not like you go take a psychedelic and then you do integration. You need to do preparation beforehand, right? Lots of preparation before you do that and then integrate. And so you also see people doing it too frequently, right? Like I knew somebody who, that was kind of his go-to whenever he didn't know how to cope with something, was go do DMT, and it didn't end well. The other one that I'll see people do is they want to skip and they don't want to do the internal work. So they just pretend, right? And this can be detrimental because sometimes you'll have a situation where people believe them and then they start following them and listening to them and they haven't done the work.
Well, and I think sometimes the pretending is I think people convince themselves.
Sure. Absolutely.
I don't think this is 100% I'm going somebody. I'm going to fool everybody and trick them into thinking that I'm this thing. I think a lot of people really believe they're that thing. And when This is why you bring up shadow work. And so as my side explanation for the people listening, shadow work is when we get to look at all the ways that we're an asshole. And basically all the things that we project onto other people and say, oh, that person's a liar. And they go, no, if I can see that they're a liar, it's because there are times when I'm a liar. If I can see that they're an asshole, it's because there's times when I'm a liar. They're selfish, or they're manipulative, or they're this or they're that.
So the way I define shadow work is shadow is merely something that's not in awareness, right? So that can be the traits we don't want to acknowledge, but it can also be, for example, have you ever seen a case where somebody really admires somebody else, but does not see that same greatness inside themselves, even though it's there? So we call that golden shadow. And also you were discussing, projection, right? Where you do the thing. And so then you get triggered when other people do the thing, or sometimes you even see people doing the thing when they're not doing it. You just imagine. I would say there are other types of shadow. There is Kim Barda, I believe, is the name. He was talking about different kinds of shadow, and I kind of added on one two that I noticed. But there's projection, right, which is what you just talked about. There's introjection, which is where you have something that somebody else installed in you that's not yours, that you've been keeping and running this script. So a lot of stuff about what you think you should do, right? Or what you think you have to do, right? That's internalized from somebody else. So that's introjection. There's a split ego state, which is what we were talking about earlier with parts that are in conflict. There's rejection. So this is where you've been wounded by something. And so you have this harsh pushing away energy, but in reality, that harsh pushing away energy just brings the thing to you. so it's
what you don't want, it's going to come.
Right. And so that's another one. And then the other one is, and this is something that I recently added, but naivete. So if you go read the old fairy tales from a Jungian perspective, right? One lesson that pops up a lot is that if you are just completely oblivious to the world, and often there is an element of almost willful ignorance there, if, at least in adults, you attract almost the universe trying to teach you this lesson of, hey, this thing exists. Hey, this thing exists. Hey, this thing exists. Right. I mean, for me, I remember it was a big shock to realize, and this wasn't that long ago, that I have a history of becoming friends with charismatic narcissists and not realizing what's going on.
Interesting.
And because it's just so far from my model of the world that I don't see the flags, right? But there was also an element of willful ignorance because I was looking for connection. So there is a part that didn't want to see the flags. And then I had to click that in because I got burned enough times.
Well, if you're somebody that's maybe more naturally introverted, et cetera, somebody that's charismatic and outgoing, that's going to be the easiest connection to make.
Right. Exactly. And so, in one of these cases, I actually apologized to somebody because they had met this person through me. And I was like, I just realized I didn't even realize until then that what kind of person that person was. And then you guys had a relationship with them through me. And I wanted to own that. I always believe in owning my stuff as soon as I become aware of it, even if, they don't care or whatever it is. So yeah, that's that shadow work. And that's a lot less fun than just eating a mushroom.
Well, yeah. Not super fun. Great thing to do in conjunction with your radical sobriety if you're on that journey with me ever. It's oh, I'm uncomfortable. Why? What are all the things that I'm thinking about, seeing what are the things that I've been pushing aside, not wanting to acknowledge and now needing to deal with. Speaking of charismatic narcissists and the coaching industry, just because we're in this industry, well, first of all, I think there's a lot of people that are outside of it that would look at any of us and be like, if you're the kind of person who thinks that you can make up your own models and your own courses and your own IP and teach it to other people and they should follow you, then, you're all a bunch of narcissists, right? And I think, one of the things that's frustrating to some of us that have been doing this for a long time and with the huge, big influx of folks doing it is there's some people in this space that are super fucking legit, really know their shit. You can learn a lot from. You should absolutely invest thousands or tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars with, because it's going to change your life and it's going to take you to the next level. And then there's a lot of people that just saw people charging that much money and said, oh, I should just like hop in and charge that much money and make some shit up. And people don't know the difference. And we can't blame them. And so now we have this crisis of trust in the industry, where it's hard for the people who have been doing it for a long time, really know their shit, really help people, really change people's lives. Like Sean's saying, he has a 100% success rate for people who do his shit, right? Really knows his shit, right? But you got all these other people that kind of jumped in and were like, me too. And now nobody knows who to trust. So, I mean, how do you think that's going to resolve? Because it's creating a problem for everybody.
No, I very much agree with you. And I often tell people that I think most coaches are not competent, right?
You just straight up say it like that. I was trying to
they don't have the skill set to reliably deliver the results that they promise. It's not that they're never going to deliver the result, because I mean, broken clocks right twice a day. And many times they've imbibed enough and stuff from other people that they can repeat enough basic things that for some people it might help. But if you're going to charge high ticket, right? If you're going to charge thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, and Michelle and I are both in that world, right? In my mind, you need to have a reliable, repeatable process that generates the result every time when people do it. So I'm an engineer by training, right? I got my degree in biomolecular engineering. You don't go build a bioreactor that 50% of the time it explodes. You just don't do that. That's not okay. And you have a lot of people doing that in coaching, where 50% of the time people do everything and they're just like, oh shit, that sucks. Sorry, that didn't work out. It's like, that's not cool. And then what happens is those people and everybody they know now gets, more and more suspicious. And so there are a couple of things that I think are going to happen. One is, personally, I think we're coming up on an economic crisis in the not too distant future. And that is absolutely going to restrict the amount of money that people are willing to spend on anything, but definitely coaching. And so I think a lot of people are going to get flushed out of the industry, frankly. The other thing is, I think that the threshold for the level of proof is continuing to move. I mean, when you and I got started, you could have a 45-minute webinar and then you could get on one call and have somebody pay, $10,000 or $15,000. That no longer works. It just doesn't, right? And I don't know anybody whose business model is doing that anymore, and being successful. I think that in the longer run, that it's going to get to the point where if you haven't published a book, and a good book at that, not a mediocre book, like a good book, you're not going to have a shot. I do think that that's going to move. I mean, there may be other ways. I mean, again, if you have really good referral networks and you make sure that you generate really solid results, especially stuff that people can point to, you can create that. I mean, honestly, a lot of my business this past couple of years has been referrals, right? Almost entirely. So, I do think referrals are going to become essential. I do think you're going to get to the point where newbie coaches, people who are new, and frankly, probably beneficial even for people who are established, is you're actually going to have to work with people and deliver some results before any payment is made.
Probably, yeah.
Or work with somebody who has a very strong network, deliver results for that person before the people in their network will pay you. And so this kind of relational marketing is something I'm going to be actually deep diving in starting next month.
Okay, that's fantastic. We'll have to have you on a totally different episode to talk about that. We're coming on time, but I do want to say for everybody, if you are looking for coaches, the nice thing about having done this for so long is it is kind of a small world. Sean and I know like most of these people. Like if you want a coach for something and you want to know who's really good, you can get in touch with us and be like, oh, I need a great, health coach, or I need a great relationship coach, or I need this. Just ask us. We know the real deal people. We will put you in touch with the right people. Sean is one of the real deal people. Sean, where can people find you online if they want to know more about you or your work?
So my company website is www.oculusinstitute.com. That's OCULUS institute.com. You can message me on Facebook. You can message me on LinkedIn. My name is Sean Sessel. If you're listening on the audio, it's SeanSessel. if you're coming from the podcast, please let me know that you heard me on the podcast and all this so that I can make sure that Michelle is aware of the good that she's spreading in the world on that subject. So I would love to, if you would just inform me of that. And that's what I'd recommend. I've actually got a lot of free resources. So if people are specifically, interested in career stuff and you want to explore, I actually have an unpublished manuscript of a book that I haven't launched yet, but I do share with prospective clients. So you want to do your research. I've got a lot of free stuff, and then if it's a good fit, then we can talk about that.
Check out Sean. I mean, you heard him; he's a super smart guy. Check out his stuff if you're interested. And Sean, thank you so much for being on with us today. I really appreciate you being here.
Thanks so much, Michelle.
We'll see you guys next time.